I last left off introducing Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and how it may serve as a key text to understanding how our society has devolved over time into a culture dictated by crony capitalism and corporate greed on the one hand, and the tyranny of the positive attitude on the other. At first glance, the book appears to focus on improving multiple aspects of the reader's life. However, when you dig into the work, the context for almost every piece of advice or rule is related to manipulating others for monetary gain. But here, it is also important to understand Carnegie's broader perspective on humanity. As the author writes, "When dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity." This perspective is also paired with Carnegie's teaching on how to get what you want. There is only one way under high heaven to get anybody to do anything. Did you ever stop to think of that? Yes, just one way, and that is by making the other person want to do it. And so, as we shall see, one way to get others to do what you want them to do is to play into their pride and vanity. And the way to do this is by making them feel important. And here, Carnegie reveals from where, at least in part, he derives his perspective on humanity. The desire for a feeling of importance is one of the chief distinguishing differences between mankind and the animals. This is nothing short of Freudianism, although, even to be fair to Sigmund Freud, a very narrow Freudianism. It is the idea that the ego is one of the distinguishing characteristics of humanity. And if you want to extract money from others, as Carnegie outlines, you must stroke others' ego. The following example from the book hits the mark on this point. Here we have a Joseph S. Webb of the Philadelphia Electric Company being successful where others had failed at selling electricity to an old woman in a district of prosperous Pennsylvania Dutch farmers. We start with this Webb, accompanied by the district representative of the company, knocking on the old woman's farmhouse. And old Mrs. Drunkenbrod peered out. As soon as she saw the company representative, said Mr. Webb, as he related the story, she slammed the door in our faces. I knocked again, and again she opened the door, and this time she began to tell us what she thought of us and our company. "Mrs. Drunkenbrod," I said, "I'm sorry we've troubled you, but I didn't come here to sell you electricity. I merely wanted to buy some eggs." She opened the door wider and peered out at us suspiciously. "I notice your fine flock of Dominics," I said, "and I should like to buy a dozen fresh eggs." The door opened a little wider. "How do you know my hens were Dominics?" she inquired, her curiosity piqued. "I raise chickens myself," I replied, "and I must say, I've never seen a finer flock of Dominics." "Why don't you use your own eggs then?" she demanded, still somewhat suspicious. "Because my Leghorns lay white eggs, and naturally, being a cook yourself, you know white eggs can't compare to brown eggs when it comes to making cake. And my wife prides herself on her cakes." By this time, Mrs. Drunkenbrod ventured out to the porch in a much more amiable frame of mind. Meanwhile, my eyes had been wandering around, and I discovered that the farm was equipped with a fine-looking dairy. "As a matter of fact, Mrs. Drunkenbrod," I continued, "I'll bet you make more money from your hens than your husband makes with his dairy." Bang! She was off. Sure she did, and she loved to tell me about it. But alas, she couldn't make her old husband, the blockhead, admit it. She invited us down to see her poultry house, and on our tour of inspection, I noticed various little contraptions that she had built, and I was hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. This, "be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise," is one of the recurring mantras of the book, and revolves closely around the idea, as we shall see later, that you should never criticize anyone. I recommended certain feeds and certain temperatures, and asked her advice on several points, and soon we were having a good time swapping experiences. Presently, she remarked that some of her neighbors had put electric lights in their hen houses, and they claimed that they had got excellent results. She wanted my honest opinion as to whether or not it would pay her to do the same thing. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Drunkenbrok's Dominic hens were clucking and scratching contentedly in the encouraging glow of electric lights. I had my order. She was getting more eggs. Everyone was satisfied. Everyone had gained. And this is the point of the story. I should never have sold electricity to this Pennsylvania Dutch farm wife if I had not first let her talk herself into it. Such people can't be sold. You have to let them buy. As it should go without saying, obviously this Joseph Webb was not visiting Mrs. Drunkenbrod to buy eggs. he was there to make a sale. This was simply a tactic to buy time, to find out what made his potential buyer tick, and how to use that information to manipulate her. And the fundamental problem here is that, while Mrs. Druckenbrod might have benefited from electricity, in the end, everyone does not benefit or gain, to cite the narrator here, when lying and manipulation for monetary gain becomes the norm. And as a quick aside, to continue examining his broader perspective on humanity, Carnegie also writes, only a couple pages removed from the previously mentioned passage, "We ought to be modest, for neither you nor I amount to much. Both of us will pass on and be completely forgotten a century from now. Life is too short to bore other people with talk of our petty accomplishments. Let's encourage them to talk instead. Come to think about it, you haven't much to brag about anyhow. Do you know what keeps you from becoming an idiot? Not much. Only a nickel's worth of iodine in your thyroid glands. If a physician were to open the thyroid gland in your neck and take out a little iodine, you would become an idiot. A little iodine that can be bought at a corner drugstore for 5 cents is all that stands between you and an institution for the mentally ill. A nickel's worth of iodine. That isn't much to be boasting about, is it? This is what can be referred to as the human as chemical vat approach to understanding humanity. It is a perspective that reduces humans and their workings down to the chemicals present in their bodies. As I emphasize periodically, this is also how powerful drugs, the likes of Prozac, other SSRIs, other psychotropics, and other drugs more generally speaking, have been historically sold, by convincing people that they have a chemical imbalance in their brain or body. And as I can personally attest, even psychology students are taught that this is inaccurate. Inaccurate, but somehow useful. And the obvious reality, I believe, is that this is still taught as useful because reducing humanity down to hormones and neurotransmitters can be helpful when trying to convince the consumer to buy certain types of products. Just in this case, the products being sold happen to be powerful pills. And here, maybe you can start to see the connection between this book, published some 90 years ago, and the problem so pervasive in our current era. Again, with its crony capitalism and corporate greed. But I will leave it off here, picking back up next time with the topics of friendship and positivity as it relates to Carnegie's book.